Screamed cheating with my wife's aunt. I, Chad Wharton, began dating Michelle Britton when we had just turned 18 and were in our senior year of high school. We both came from middle-class families with several siblings, stay-at-home moms, and fathers who worked with their hands. I thought Michelle was a pretty girl, and intelligence or cheerful nature wasn't as important to me when I was going through my macho stage at 18 as looks. We seemed to like each other. We wanted to experiment, and we seemed to think we were more mature than we really were, so we often frolic in the back seat of my 1950 Ford. Neither Michelle nor I really realized what we were doing. Believe it or not, I wasn't sure when it was best to wear protection, and Michelle was even more naive. After half a dozen lovemaking sessions, Michelle apparently heard from some reliable source that it was much more fun to do it for a while without protection, and then interrupt everything and put on. I agreed with that. We discovered that it was actually much more fun to do it without a rubber. We found that it was so much fun that neither of us wanted to stop to put it on. Michelle was told that if she showered afterward, she could avoid pregnancy. We tried our luck for 4 months before Michelle started throwing up in the mornings. When the rabbit died, which at the time meant you're pregnant, there was only one thing left to do. Michelle and I were married in a small ceremony before the end of the school year. Fortunately, she didn't truly prove herself until after graduation, so she wasn't kicked out of school. Britton and Wharton's parents and other relatives did their best to hide their disappointment in us and to hide the fact that Michelle was pregnant. The reception went quite decently. One unusual event took place: the arrival of Aunt Ethel Turner. Aunt Ethel was the younger sister of Michelle's mother. She was probably only 26 or 27 years old at the time, but she seemed much older and more sophisticated. Well, maybe sophisticated is not the right word. Maybe just more social or sophisticated in affairs. She was also probably the most affluent member of the family. She was the first person in our family to go to college, let alone graduate, and owned at least 2 businesses she told me about. Aunt Ethel looked very different from her sisters or Michelle. While all the women on Michelle's mother's side of the Turners were pretty, Ethel was anything but. She was exotic. While the other Turner-Britton women had beautiful bodies, Ethel was sybaritic. She had the largest breasts for a woman of normal height that I had ever seen. She was unmarried, and there was talk in the family that she was both a career woman and weird, or else someone like her must have been married. She was never seen in the company of a man, although she would occasionally show up at family gatherings with a friend. Knowing what I had heard about Aunt Ethel, I was surprised when she wanted to dance with me when the rookie disc jockey hired by Michelle's parents, they did play discs in those days, played a slow song, and then a second song immediately afterward. Aunt Ethel had a sparkling personality, far more sparkling than any other woman I had encountered earlier in my life, and she was obviously very intelligent and made no attempt to hide her intelligence, as many women of the time did. However, I was more than a little embarrassed when every now and then she would thrust her huge breasts with force. I was completely confused when near the end of the second slow song she pressed her right thigh against me. A devilish smile appeared on her face. She seemed to really enjoy the sweat that broke out on my forehead, as she made it impossible for me to move away from her. When Michelle and I went to a lakeside motel about 30 kilometers from home for our 2-day honeymoon that started right after the reception, it wasn't a good sign because despite my best efforts to the contrary, I mentally saw Aunt Ethel. Michelle and I started our life together in the basement of her parents' house since neither of us had any money. Within 6 years, I had found a decent job as a warehouse loader, weighed 105 pounds, and was strong even for my height. I was making a wage that was about 4 times the minimum wage at the time. Michelle got a part-time job at the store. Living with Michelle's parents was not easy, however, because she never wanted to make love unless she was sure everyone else was asleep. And by then, I was usually asleep, and her family was too intrusive and clingy. When she was 7 months pregnant, love was forbidden. Michelle had absolutely no interest in it. The only perk of living with Michelle's parents was the visits Aunt Ethel made every 2 weeks. She would always hug me tightly, pressing those natural wonders of her body against my chest, and kiss me on the cheek, and sometimes casually run her hand over me. Although I moved things for a living, my passion was dogs. In fact, I was a bit of an expert at handling dogs and many other animals. For some reason, all dogs, even the difficult ones like the German Shepherd who lived 3 houses away from where I grew up and would try to bite anyone who came near to touch her, but would roll over on her back so I would pet her belly, loved me. Aunt Ethel was quite intrigued when, during her usual bi-weekly Sunday visit, I was playing with Michelle's family's 2 golden retrievers in the backyard when a wayward, snarling Rottweiler burst into the neighborhood. The retrievers hastily retreated behind me, and I approached the intruder, speaking to him in a firm but non-threatening voice. He growled at me for a few seconds, then looked me in the eye as I approached with my hand outstretched. He let me pet him and examined his collar to see if the owner's contact information was on it. There was. I yelled into the house for someone to call the number I had read out and bring me a leash. The Rottweiler growled and made a few aggressive movements when Michelle's younger brother pulled out the leash, but I calmed the dog down, put the leash on him, rubbed him under the chin, and then took him out into the front yard to wait for the owner. A very curious Aunt Ethel came out of the house into the front yard where I alternately sat and wrestled with Samson, a nickname I had gotten thanks to my Rottweiler tags. When Aunt Ethel first approached Samson, he growled, but I calmed him down to the point where he allowed Aunt Ethel to gently stroke him on the top of his head, although a low mooing still came out of his throat when she did. "Have you always had a special relationship with dogs?" she asked, really quite surprised. "Of course," I replied. "We always had a dog, and I used to take care of dogs and walk them for money when I was a teenager. I always had an understanding with them," I replied. "Have you thought about going into business working with them?" she asked. "I don't know how," I replied, shrugging my shoulders. "I don't know what I would do with them to make money." "Let me handle it," she said with a wide smile. We chatted some more while the rest of the family, including the 2 retrievers, looked out the window until a few minutes later the owner pulled up in an old pickup truck. It was a gray-haired old man with tattoos on his arms and wearing dirty overalls. When he approached, he had a completely shocked expression on his face. "Samson is your dog?" I asked, standing up. "Of course," he answered in a country accent. "I'm Jake Riley. God, I've never seen him act like that with anyone but me before. He hasn't bitten you once?" "No, he and I are buddies," I replied with a laugh, stroking Samson's muzzle. "I'll be damned," Jake marveled, shaking my hand, and I said, "I'm Chad Wharton." "So he'd never gotten attached to anyone before?" Aunt Ethel intervened. "No, ma'am," Jake answered, lifting his worn baseball cap. "I've just never seen anything like it. I had family he lived with for years, and he had no sympathy for me. I almost had to get rid of him a few times." Aunt Ethel pestered Jake for more information for a few more minutes, but Jake didn't seem eager to get out of here. He seemed uncomfortable talking to such an exotic, intelligent woman. I knelt down to undo Samson's leash, and he licked my face. The look on Jake's face when he did that said it all. Words weren't needed, though Jake did mutter, "Well, I won't be the one to—" The incident with the Rottweiler caused quite a stir in the Britton household. I was treated like a hero, especially by my father and my younger brother Michelle. Aunt Ethel seems to have got the gears turning in her head. She left before dinner, which was unusual for her, saying she needed to do some investigating. And the adulation of the other members of the Britton Turner clan passed over the next 2 weeks. But in the meantime, Aunt Ethel didn't let the grass grow under her feet. Instead of visiting me every other week on Sundays, she called and asked to see me on Saturday. I drove up to her house in my 1950 Ford. The house was the most beautiful house I had ever seen. It wasn't that big, but my goodness, how gorgeous! Although at the time I still thought Aunt Ethel was older than she really was, and not because of her looks, I was still amazed that she could have such beautiful things. After the traditional big hug and kiss on the cheek, she got right down to business. "Chad, you're probably a little confused as to why I invited you here. Let me ask you a few questions first. I hope you don't think I'm nosy, but I need to get as much information as I can." "Ask away," I replied. "How much money do you make now?" $4.50 an hour and 1.5 times that if I work more than 40 hours a week." "What benefits do you get?" I have some health insurance. I don't know exactly what it covers. I rarely get sick and don't go to the doctor, but it helps a little bit for Michelle to see a doctor during her pregnancy. What would you say about a guarantee of $6, $0 an hour, and the ability to earn 10 times that with similar medical care? Who do I have to kill? I grinned. I did a little research and came to the conclusion that this community needs a business that matches your skills. You could open a kennel and get into the dog training business. I would provide seed money, Aunt Ethel began. I had no idea what seed money was, but I didn't want to seem foolish, so I didn't ask. I'll guarantee you $6, $0 an hour for the first 6 months to get the business going. After that, we will be 50-50 its partners. Once I make $100,000, I will rewrite the business to you for free. Wow, I exclaimed. Is that true? Yes, it is. Plus, I've already found a piece of land suitable for you that doesn't require a zoning change, and it has a small house on it that you and Michelle could move into and live in for free for the first 6 months. Are you freaking kidding me? Excuse me, Aunt Ethel. Are you kidding me? No, let's go over the details. Aunt Ethel and I developed what I later learned is called a business plan. To be honest, I didn't understand most of it, but I really liked the gist of it. An hour and a half later, I was dizzy. I need to talk to Michelle about this, I said when I reached a saturation point. When do I have to make a decision? I have an opportunity to buy the property within a month. So you have to make a decision by then, or I'll have to revise my calculations and look for another property. I don't want to do that. This is the perfect place. Why don't you and Michelle come look at it tomorrow with me? The next day, Sunday, Michelle and her father and I got into my Ford and drove to the estate that Aunt Ethel had pointed out to me. It was about 10 minutes away from Michelle's parents' house and about 15 minutes away, almost in the opposite direction, from Aunt Ethel's house. Aunt Ethel was waiting for us. It really was a cute little house, the appropriate word being small, although it was bigger than the basement we were now living in. It seemed to me a fitting place for the kennel that Aunt Ethel was financing. Apparently, she'd already asked some construction dude to set aside a plot of about 40 acres. The whole lot was about an acre and a half, where the kennel and training area would be, and how to tear down the old barn and build a new one 3 times as big. Although I like the place, this guy doesn't know anything about business, Michelle's father rightly pointed out. I'll take care of that, Aunt Ethel laughed. I'll start with the advertising campaign, and word of mouth will do the rest once everyone sees how skillful Chad is. However, there's one more thing I've found out. In order for Chad and I to get our license, we have to take a course at a local college. This takes place in the evening, after work, so it won't interfere with Chad's work until it's time to move. Both Michelle and I were a little anxious, but for different reasons. I didn't know if I had the talent to pull it off, and I think Michelle was apprehensive mostly because she was attached to her immediate family, but Michelle's dad gave us his approval, which was a big deal. The following week, I received another incentive that exceeded my expectations. The following Saturday, I went again to Aunt Ethel's to talk about it some more. She met me in a bathing suit. It was 1960, and Brian Hyland's song Tiny Yellow Pea Bikini had just come out. If you substituted yellow peas for red and white striped, the song could have been written for Aunt Ethel. I didn't even need a big hug to get me excited. I was just sunbathing in the backyard. I hope you don't mind if we sit out there, Chad, she chirped. No, of course, I mumbled, stammering. She brought me a beer, even though I was still more than 2 years away from adulthood, and herself a glass of wine on the back porch of her house. We talked business for a bit, as much as we could while I admired her gorgeous body, and then the direction of the conversation changed. Chad, I hope I'm not scaring you off, but I need to ask a few personal questions as well. Don't let that put you off. I swear that whatever we talk about will never be revealed to anyone else. I don't remember expressing my approval in any way, or even nodding, before she began. Chad, do you, like the rest of the Britton and Turner families, think I'm different? I really don't know, I managed to squeeze out. You always seem to have a reaction when I press my whole body against you, don't you? Yeah, sorry, I mumbled. Don't apologize. I love it, she smiled. Tell me, do you love Michelle? Yeah, I think so. We're married. Yeah, but it wasn't like you dated for a long time. made love to a lot of other people, and made a conscious decision to get married. Her pregnancy kind of forced you into it, didn't it? Yeah, but I really like her. Well, how's your love life since you got married? Gosh, Aunt Ethel, should we even talk about that? I replied, but that was all I had time to say before she got up from her lounger, came over, and sat on my lap. I bet it's been a long time since you've had love, hasn't it? Now that she's doing well with her pregnancy. She said the same thing the day of the Rottweiler incident, Aunt Ethel continued, not the least bit embarrassed. Ugh, but these last few months have been hard because I'm used to sleeping with her. Making love, and now it hurts. I'll probably never get married because I like making love to different guys and I don't want kids. You know what I do best in the world, Chad? No, I mumbled, stammering. Damn it, Chad. If we do this business together, we'll have tons of opportunities to sleep together. I'll make your life fantastic, she said in a passionate voice, and then kissed me. I desired her, so much so that it didn't even occur to me to pretend that I wanted to stop. I had never even thought about Michelle, but Aunt Ethel had mentioned her. You'll be a better husband to Michelle and a better father when your child is born if you're a truly happy man, Chad. And I'll make you a really happy man, Aunt Ethel whispered in my ear before sticking her tongue out. Aunt Ethel smiled, took my hand, and led me to the couch in her living room. When we got inside, she pulled down all of my clothes. I began to undress. When Aunt Ethel and I regained consciousness, we kissed. Now we need to talk turkey, she said as I stroked her. If you start working with me, you can count on me to do it twice a week, as long as we both behave with restraint, and I can continue to act like an unconventional girl. Don't ever think that you'll abandon Michelle or your child, or that we'll get married. We'll just enjoy each other's company and be happy and content. Deal? Deal, I grinned, shaking her hand. After my first meeting with Aunt Ethel, my life was not perfect, but almost so. Aunt Ethel and I started several very successful businesses together. By the time I turned 30, with Aunt Ethel's help, I owned franchise dog training and grooming establishments in 20 different states and became a millionaire. As long as Aunt Ethel managed to maintain her appearance, she and I made love an average of 3 times a week until she was killed in a car accident when she had just turned 60. No one suspected a thing, even when she and I spent long weekends together at conferences related to the business in which we were partners. Incredibly, my love affair with Aunt Ethel got better with time. She was right. Despite her many talents, Aunt Ethel knew how to make love better than anyone else. We used every position, toy, and scenario known to mankind. One strange thing, I never called her anything other than Aunt Ethel, even during passionate lovemaking, and she never wanted me to call her anything else. I think it turned us both on. At the very time that Aunt Ethel made me the most sexually satisfied man on the planet, I learned to love Michelle, and she learned to love me, and we had 3 beautiful, happy, intelligent children, of whom we are proud grandparents of 6 grandchildren. During her lifetime, Aunt Ethel spoiled all of our children and was their favorite relative. Now, Michelle and I are well into our 70s, and we still enjoy lovemaking once every couple weeks, but our relationship goes far beyond what is acceptable. They are based on love and respect, and we enjoy growing old together. However, not a day goes by that I don't think about Aunt Ethel. Sigh, the end.